often in the wellness community, the solution is how can I get more clients or patients? And it's a really challenging way to look at your business because the only way to make more money in that model is to work harder and harder and harder.
So, what's the alternative then?
I think the alternative is to look.
Welcome to the Aim in Practice podcast, where we help acupuncturists and massage therapists shift from technician to transformational guide so you can create a purpose driven practice that brings lasting change to your clients and yourself. I'm your host, Dr. Jess Reynolds, and today I am chatting with Jason Stein, a licensed acupuncturist with over 25 years of experience who has successfully transitioned from urban practitioner to rural wellness center. Also, he runs the Wellness Renegades podcast and a coaching platform that helps practitioners build sustainable practice. So in today's episode, you will learn how to build a wellness practice that aligns with your values, financial goals, and natural rhythms, why addressing your relationship with money is crucial for both personal and professional success, how to create an alternative revenue stream that can really prevent burnout and build long-term sustainability, and much, much more. Now, Jason's journey from acupuncture school graduate to successful wellness center owner spans over 2 decades of hands-on experience in both clinical practice as well as business development. As the former business curriculum instructor at Oregon College of Oriental Medicine and founder of Wellness Renegades, he brings a truly unique blend of clinical expertise and entrepreneurial wisdom. And having successfully built a thriving practice in a town of just 1,200 people while maintaining a national coaching presence, Jason really is in a unique position to help practitioners create a sustainable, profitable practice that honors both their healing mission and business goals. So now let's dive into our conversation with Jason. Today's episode is sponsored by Jane, a clinic management software and EMR that helps you handle your clinic's daily admin tasks so you can free up evenings and weekends. Now, the Jane team understands how precious your time is and recognizes that charting can often be the most time-consuming admin task for many practitioners. That's why they're here to help. To save you from having to start your chart notes from scratch, you can check out Jane's template library, which gives you access to templates that have been very generously created and shared by health and wellness practitioners in the community. Once you have a template you like, you can choose to customize it further with charting tools such as range scales, text fields, checkboxes, and a lot more. So to see how Jane can help you spend more time doing what you love, click the link in the show notes and book a personalized demo. Or if you're ready to get started, you can use the code AIM1MO at the time of sign up for a 1-month grace period applied to your new Jane account. Well, Jason, welcome. Chief Rogue Officer himself. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
So there are many different reasons why I'm excited to talk to you, right? I mean, one is, as we were discussing before we started recording, you really are living the dream, right? Like you've got a very successful wellness practice and you live above it, and you're in a rural community from what I understand as well, and you're also managing to make that super successful. And then on top of that, you're a fellow acupuncturist and you're interested in business, and there's so many cool different avenues and areas that we can really dive into. But if it's okay with you, first, I'm really curious about the process that you went through. You know, you've graduated, you're practicing, and then I'm assuming you were in a city and then moved into a small town. What was that transition like, and what sort of inspired that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been in a couple of cities. When I graduated, I've been licensed as an acupuncturist since 1998. So just over 25 years now, which feels like I feel like an old man in some ways, but I feel pretty young in others. And so I moved from Albuquerque to Portland, Oregon, and that was in about 2000. In Albuquerque, I was working as an acupuncturist in a hospital. And I also was teaching at the school because my grandfather was an entrepreneur. My father was an entrepreneur. I was one of those kids that sold, like, I'd go to Sam's Club and buy suckers and then resell them. So I've always been interested in, like, how can you make money, but also do what you love? And for a long time, I was working at the school in Portland, which was the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine. And I started consulting because I love business. I love helping people make money doing what they love. And When COVID hit in 2020, my wife and I had about a 10-year plan to move to a rural community, and Portland got really weird. Like, wherever you stand on masks, I respect, but they were having people mask outdoors, and there were certain policies that I just didn't agree with. And we knew it was time. So my wife and I headed to the coast. We went down south, and this is in the state of Oregon. And we went to all the small communities seeing what would be a fit. And we came out to the Wallowas, which is Eastern Oregon. And there's a small community that's filled with artists and ranchers. And it's called Joseph, Oregon, also known as the Swiss Alps of Oregon. And we decided we were going to land here. And we bought a tiny house, and we decided to build a wellness center from the ground up because I used to teach all the business curriculum at the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine. And I used to say, if you have a chiropractor, an acupuncturist, a homeopath, and a massage therapist in the same building, who makes the most annually?
That's a good question. My guess would be Cairo.
It's the guy that owns the building.
Oh, it's the guy that owns the building. Okay.
So we're in a very small town. So the population here is 1,200, and the county itself is 7,000. And my wife's a naturopath. And so we don't take insurance. And we've built, just in a couple of years, a dream practice. And I think the main question I'm circling back to is, how did we get here? During COVID, it was a push of, are you really living life on your own terms? And I was mostly, but not entirely. And so this gave me the opportunity.
Mm. That little last thing you said, mostly but not entirely, I think that's a really important thing to consider, because so often people are okay with the mostly. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that, right? Totally fine. But really sitting down and saying, am I okay with this? Mostly, but not entirely. That last little bit, wow, so that was enough. That not entirely was enough for you to uproot your life, move into a rural community, and then just start from scratch. That's amazing.
Yeah, there's a feeling out here that people say either the county welcomes you in or they kick you out. and and because we don't take insurance, one of the smartest things we did was we built a 2-hour donation clinic. And so uh, there were one or two other acupuncturists that had come to town and tried this, and it didn't work. And they said, community acupuncture doesn't work. And I said, well, I believe it can. And so we brought in a massage therapist. And as I said, my wife's a naturopath. And for 2 hours a week, we open the clinic doors on donation. And some people bring money, some people bring chickens, some people bring vegetables. Like it's really an interesting community. And it's probably my favorite 2 hours of the week.
What I find really interesting about that is you're taking a principle of business, right? So we could dig into these basic principles of how do you sort of start and grow a wellness practice. A great way is doing something like you said, have 2 hours a week, and which is open by donation. But what I find really cool and unique about what you just said is most people think donation, money. But being in a small community, have being open-minded to think, actually, if we're really open to donation, we have to be much more open-minded as far as what people can actually donate. Because maybe some people just genuinely can't donate money, but they got a bunch of chickens. That is so cool.
Yeah, and we would really say to people, we don't want you to stretch yourself. Like we're doing really well in the practice. We have massage therapists, we have kickboxing, we have an infrared sauna. And so the strain on us personally isn't always, is our landlord going to raise the rent next month? Like how can we work harder? And often in the wellness community, the solution is, how can I get more clients or patients? And it's a really challenging way to look at your business, because the only way to make more money in that model is to work harder and harder and harder.
So what's the alternative then?
I think the alternative is to look at different models that already work. One of those models is to bring on associates. one of those models is you might have product lines that you really believe in and that you share for free all the time. You're like, these supplements are the best, or this pillow that I love my pillow, right? And so to look at finding other revenue streams. The last is in the wellness space, most people are working session to session, and I don't think that's the best model. I believe that you can either do membership models or that you can do programs. And often in the wellness world, people want programs because they're wanting that high level touch of having someone by their side for the journey.
Right. Right. And I also think too a little bit about demographic, right? You get the type of practitioner whose primary demographic is just like the walk-ins, the
Mm,
once a month, once every couple months, coming for a
mm.
checkup and beautiful. But when you get the practitioners who are much more interested in long-term care and maybe dealing with chronic illness, or they know ahead of time, I'm going to be needing to see you for a minimum of X number of sessions, then it definitely makes a lot more sense to do memberships or programs. And when you are considering programs, like how do you develop them? Do you have like unique programs for each person that you would develop, or is it like a pre-made program? Somebody goes to your website and it's like
Yeah, I don't
holistic health
find
program.
pre-made programs work that well.
Mm,
I just launched a mastermind. We worked together for 6 months this year. There were 7 providers that each built their own program that was very uniquely tailored to them. And so one was a natural acne relief program because this acupuncturist is trained in really a style of dermatology where most people are putting harsh chemicals on their skin to try to get rid of the acne. So it's kind of like headed the opposite direction. Yeah. Now, as well, skincare products often have endocrine disruptors in them. So you're changing your hormone state. And so this woman has built a program where my goal was that everyone would have the program done with the intention of having the first person in. And she did. She had the first person in the program.
that's super cool. Now, are these people that are working in your clinic or in your wellness center?
No, these are people that are national. So
Nice.
I have two wings to my business. One is Wellness Renegades, and the other is Wallowa Avenue Wellness. And so the Wellness Center, Wallowa Avenue, is local. And then Wellness Renegades, I've been coaching businesses for, 15, 17 years now.
Mhm. Okay, cool. I mean, and it's two very different, I guess, conversations that we can have. The one which we've been kind of up to now has been the practice itself and building the wellness center, and then there's the more expansive. Now, that's really interesting. One of the things I really appreciate that is a topic that I'm gonna have to say preach instead of just speak about, because
Yeah.
I'm fairly adamant about it. I never really stop. Is what I call off the table stuff, right? So as practitioners, like you said, is there is a cap to the amount of money a person could make because there's only so many hours in the day and we only have so much capacity to treat patients, and maybe even there's just so many people who need treatment. So the actual dollars per hour of being a practitioner, it is always limited. But then there's these other things that we can do, which I'm calling off the table, which is taking our experience as a wellness practitioner, as a business owner, and as whatever other cool thing we do, bundle them together and then help other people in the same situation. And it sounds a lot more like that's what Wellness Renegades is about.
Yes. Wellness
Mhm,
Renegades came because I believe most people were getting a high-end lease in a strip mall 15 years ago, and they were following a cookie cutter model that really often led to no money saved in retirement and burnout.
mhm,
And so I really wanted to take a look at how can you flip the script on the models and what models work for uh, the renegade. Like,
mhm,
it's David versus Goliath out there for me because, you're competing against a pharmacy that is selling medication. Like if you go into the doctor, you usually get 5 minutes now. If you're in a pretty high end system, sometimes it's down to 3 minutes. Like the MA will take care of you and tell you you don't have to wait that much longer. You're usually in there for 3 minutes and you've been waiting 30 to 45 minutes. And then the first thing that comes out is the prescription pad for the script.
mhm,
Right. And so knowing that people are just yearning for that individual attention, there's two models that I see that can really work. And one is really seeing a lot of people for a very low cost. And the other is a more boutique service of seeing a few people for a very high cost. And then from there, you can paint between the lines, in the lines, outside the lines of what do you want to create?
Mhm. Can we talk about both of those avenues? So there's a practitioner who's more along the lines of more volume for less dollar. What does that look like in application? Like when you're working with your coaching clients and they've chosen that avenue. Let's just assume they're not painting out of the lines too terribly much, but they've chosen
Sure.
that avenue.
So you're talking about seeing a lot of people for a lower cost?
Hmm.
Yeah. So I have a past client in the state of California. CalMed doesn't pay that much. I think it pays 40. It might be a little less, a little more. But he figured out he wanted a very high volume practice. So he has 6 treatment rooms and he's seeing 6 people per hour, right? 6 times 40 is what he's seeing. And he does incredibly well. And this model would drive other people crazy. Like you have to find your natural rhythm.
Mm,
For some people, it is really easy to see a high volume practice and you feel energized at the end of the week. For other people, you go for those high numbers and you're just like, I just need to sleep and my adrenals are burnt out. And so the challenge is, let's say you have a 5 element practitioner or a therapist that wants to spend 2 hours with people, but they're still charging that hour rate and the numbers don't flush out.
mhm,
And so you have to figure out, reverse engineer the numbers. Is this really a profitable venture or am I just working all the time?
mhm. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of pain points that you just identified in there. I mean, the first was natural rhythm. Like I imagine being that practitioner in California you described, which I've tried it. Hated it. Like the idea of just pumping through that just, oh, my whole body gets the shivers and then I immediately like develop chronic fatigue syndrome. Like just so it
Yeah,
doesn't work for me. But I'm curious then. So you're working with these practitioners, then I suppose the first problem that you would help people with is helping them find their flow and their rhythm and sort of what they actually want to do. So is that part of the process? And if so, how do you go about helping people with that?
absolutely. I generally work with people on that level at 6 month contracts where I'm on retainer. So that means they can email me, they can text me, and we always start with a strategic plan because most wellness providers don't have a marketing plan, don't have a strategic plan. It's like putting out fires and often they're on a path that's headed towards a brick wall, but they don't know how to pivot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
And I want to say one more thing, Jess, that I think
please.
super important is to not be judgmental. Like I was a little judgmental of people that would see 6 to 8 an hour. So I went to see one of those people that I knew was getting good, solid feedback. I was blown away. I was
Mhm,
blown away by my experience as a healer. And it broke my kind of pre-context that, well, they're just in it for the money or they're just like, and it's not true. They have a different rhythm that just you and I couldn't do, but it's perfect for them.
I really appreciate you bringing that up, Jason, because it's so easy for one person's style to be like, this is the way to do it. And if you're not doing it this way, then fill in the blank, right? So I really appreciate you bringing that up because if it is genuinely, authentically the way the person thrives and loves to practice, then I'm sure that they could provide an amazing experience. Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
So,
I used to poo-poo the other way as well. I've learned a lot in the years that I've been doing this, and that is, I've seen people work with someone for an hour to 2 hours and charge 500 to $1,000, and like, there's a part of me that used to be like, well, that's wrong. That should not, but that's their rhythm, and it works for them, and their patients are happy to pay that price. So
right.
we have to get into a question of how do I resonate and what's my natural rhythms? That's what often, if you've come from a background of Chinese medicine, that it's all originates from.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that completely. And that's another topic that I love to teach on is building a business that honors the natural rhythms And when I think of the second type of practitioner, the one that's more along the lines of the boutique experience, wanting to spend a couple hours and really like making it an experience,
Hmm.
right? That could certainly be a struggle because I remember at some point in time coming across you wrote perhaps a mini book or something on charging what you're worth, right? So it's
Mhm.
like, how do you identify that if you're the practitioner who's seeing six people an hour, or you're the practitioner who really wants that boutique experience? How do you charge what you're worth, and how do you figure out how to price your services in a way that is sustainable for you in the business, that doesn't
Yeah.
leave any resentment or animosity between you and your patients, which can certainly happen, and that makes you feel like, hey, I'm worth something.
Yeah, I think that we have to, as healers, we have to talk about money. One of my favorite quotes from one of my mentors was, "Be their healer, not their banker." Because as wellness providers, we're often so concerned that our prices are too high or that we wouldn't pay that price. And I think the challenge that I see that wellness providers face is that we often give such good service and we don't want to charge for that service. So often I have clients that are giving VIP, like they're on retainer, they're answering texts and emails on the weekend, not getting paid for it. They're developing individually tailored formulated herbs, not getting paid for that time to put that together, right? And so I think we have to start to reevaluate, where are we giving it away for free that we wouldn't ask our best friend to do the same? Like we would be like, you're insane. You if you do a spreadsheet, you're making $7 an hour.
Hmm. Hmm. How do you do that then? How does one go about that process?
I think it starts with doing your money work. Like all of us were trained by our grandparents or parental figures or parents. Someone taught us certain things about money that may not be true. And we have to break through the falsehoods of our belief systems that aren't serving us. So that's really the first way. And then the second way is we want to start to hang out with people that are successful in different models that we're interested in, right? There's an old story about a guy who really wanted to be a sailor, but he lived in Arizona. Like it's hard to sail on the ocean in Arizona, so he moved to California and he just started hanging out at the docks and started making friends. And next thing you know, someone wanted to start helping him. And this is a true story for me. When I moved out here, I had touched a gun 3 times in my life, but I always wanted to learn how to hunt. And so, 2 years ago, I got a hunting mentor, and I've started to feed my family with buck and elk and venison, and just like really starts with, it's not going to happen in an echo chamber, and there really is somebody that's probably already doing what you want to do, that is really doing it financially successfully.
That brings up an interesting thought for me, and I'm curious if you'd like to explore this, because what I found personally is, as a teacher and a podcast host and a coach and a practitioner, is I spend a lot of my time in this capacity talking about, hey, here's the things that I do to help my clients and patients and so on and so forth. But you just said, like you got a mentor. And I'm curious if you're okay with it. Can we dig into a bit more of like how have you gotten to where you are? Who are the people who have helped you in that
Uh,
process? Or are you just like, it's all me? What's that
no,
been
no,
like?
it's definitely not all me. So my first mentor was my grandfather, and he was a serial entrepreneur. He came in through Ellis Island from Poland into New York. He started a cabinet. Well, first he was a banker, and he was Jewish, and he was the first manager of the bank that was Jewish because they didn't want Jewish managers at the time. And from there, he started saving money and started a lumber company. And when lumber started to go down, he realized the excess leftover lumber he could get made into cabinets, and started doing cabinet making. And so he just went from thing to thing, where what are the resources, what do people need, and how do I mix those together? And he taught me a lot about business. he was very disappointed when I went to acupuncture school because he wanted me to go to Harvard Business School, but wasn't my path. Um, Another mentor for me for 10 years, I worked for a company called Heart of Business. And I was really good at being a coach, but I wasn't so great at creating systems. And so I found a position as an associate within a consulting firm that really wanted every act of business to be an act of love. And they've done incredibly well over the years. Their old tagline was, when you want to make a difference and you need to make a profit. And that gentleman's name was Mark Silver. And Mark taught me Sufi principles, and he overlaid them into business structures. And,
Mm.
if you don't know Sufism, it's the mystical branch of Islam. And to think about in the times that we've lived in since September 11th, to build a successful company on the mystical branch of Islamic culture is pretty crazy. Now, I identify as like a brother of Sufism, where I'm not a Sufi. Like, I don't identify as being a Sufi, but I believe that the principles of kindness and love, and if you've ever read Rumi or Hafiz, the poetry just says it all. And it taught me that you can really go out in left field and get some tremendously successful results.
Mhm.
And so, big shout out to Mark Silver. The third mentor I'll talk about is Ken Weiser, and Ken became one of my closest friends. And Kenny was a naturopathic physician, but before he became a naturopath, he was making films in Hollywood, and he got testicular cancer. And he stopped everything and decided to heal his cancer naturally. And Ken Weiser is the first alternative provider that worked for Nike. He started a wellness center on Nike campus in Hillsboro, Oregon. And he then became the first naturopath in the Providence Health System. And if you live on the west coast of Oregon, Providence Health System is pretty big. And he went in and he just wanted to bring the medicine inside. And now I believe they have like 5 acupuncturists and 5 like way more than just him.
Mm.
And he's taught me again and again how to open doors. And opening doors is a very important element when you're a renegade, because if it's just you versus the world, it is a very hard road. But if it's
Mm.
you coming and saying, let me just be helpful. So let me give you a specific example, Jess, of Ken Weiser's teaching. And that is, um, I've been through coach training, and part of my coach training was to offer something free to a company. And I have always been interested in meditation. I'm a regular meditator. So I developed a meditation in the workplace program. Um, and I went to Providence because I had one connection that knew someone in HR and human resources. And they have a EAP program, which is an employee assistant program. And I said, can I do a free 2-hour talk on meditation in the workplace? And this was a long time ago. And they said yes. And they used to have a recording where you would call the recording and sign up that way. That's how long ago it was. And it sold out in the first 12 hours. And they asked me to do it again. I did it again. It sold out in the first 6 hours. And then they said, we want to pay you to do this. Are you interested? I said, absolutely. And I had no idea that they were one of the largest employee assistance programs in the Northwest region. So this is the municipalities of Multnomah County, which is the largest county in the state of Oregon. This is the library system. This is like just tremendous amount of access. And so I just started doing that regularly and getting paid to do it. I don't believe I would get paid to do it if I went and I said, will you pay me to do this?
Hmm.
So that was a
Right.
Ken Weiser tip for me.
I think from just the three examples, and I'm sure there are many more, but what an amazing foundational set of skills, right? From your grandfather, just basic entrepreneurship mindset, which unbelievably valuable skill to have. And as you said at the beginning, the type of kid who would go to the store and buy a box of lollipops and sell them, right? So like this route in entrepreneurship. And then I appreciate the second mentor being like, how do you do that, but with heart? How do you do that with a foundation in um, I guess giving. I think of the Go Giver, the book The Go Giver, if you've
I
ever read
love
it, and
that
it's a
book. Yeah.
brilliant, but it's such a good book, right?
Yeah.
And then followed by another essential skill, which is as you call it, network or opening doors, which is like networking and building a community. And and I'm curious within these things, right? So you've got this like, well, just imagine, just for the sake of conversation, that we've got these three different areas that have led you to being the successful entrepreneur and business owner that you are. Um, I know for myself that a big part of how I choose to and certainly speak about how I conduct myself is I think authenticity should be like top. Like you should build your business out of authenticity. And yet, I have gone years down the road of inauthenticity before I'm like, whoa, 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 hang on, hang tight here. So I'm curious if you've had any similar experiences, right? You've got these brilliant mentors and people who've helped you out, taught you solid lessons, and yet you either unconsciously went the opposite direction or deliberately chose to ignore it. Any of these experiences where you've acted against what you genuinely believe?
Yeah, I think there's been a few times, but before we get into that, Jess, I have one more mentor because I
Oh, please.
realized the ones I named were all male. And there's a female mentor, which is my mom, who was a custody mediator for 40 years. And all she did is work with people that really did not like each other and how to mediate conflict. And I
Mm,
think to be really good at business, you have to start to understand conflict resolution. And Crucial Conversations is a great book. I was trained in nonviolent communication with Marshall Rosenberg. So just really, with the yin is the yang, and with the yang is the yin, that you really, having multiple mentors, multiple personalities, multiple characteristics, super helpful.
mhm,
So coming back to your question, was there a time, I think that there were a couple positions that I probably stayed in too long. And that the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine, I was helpful, but I feel like I probably should have either recruited additional support or I should have handed the reins over, um, probably a year or two earlier than I did. And I have some remorse about that. Um, and then I also feel the same way with Heart of Business, where when I'm working for someone else, I tend to stick it out a bit longer because I feel like I have responsibilities and I should show up and I've made agreements. And what I've learned is that everything's uh, negotiable. So if you give your word to someone, including yourself, you can renegotiate. You need to reflect in the renegotiation. Am I doing this just to get out of being my word? Or is there a time to quit things? And if there's a time to quit things, how can I do it with integrity?
mhm. I really appreciate that, this idea of renegotiation. I've certainly struggled with that. Like I'm the type of person who's like, if I give my word, if it kills me, oh well, my fault, right? So I really appreciate that it's possible to have integrity and be a person of your word and really mean it, and also acknowledge the fact at some point in time, like, okay, you know what? I know I said this, but it turns out that something, and I'm curious about that moment, right? You've gave me two examples of these like you kind of stuck it out too long. How how did you know, or what were like the first signs in retrospect where you maybe could have made that decision to move on or leave or renegotiate?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think like a parallel metaphor would be like if you're in a partnership and you see that person that their car's in the driveway when you're coming home, are you excited or are you disappointed? And so if you are doing something like right now, I have a client that has their own acupuncture practice, but they go and work in a community practice 1 day a week. And they know that they're past due to let it go. And they feel responsible and they know all the patients there love them. But if you're headed to work and you know that it doesn't feel good in your gut and your system, that's when it's time to have the conversation.
Right. And I also feel on in our industry as practitioners, I think it's particularly important, right? Like if you're working at a, I don't know, a department store, or like if you're a mechanic or something like that, and your heart's not in it, you could still do the job, and you could technically get the job done very proficiently. But when you're showing up to work and you're in a room with a patient and you're not in it, it's a
Yeah.
totally different thing. So I think it's super important to really monitor these whole body signs of like, no. Yeah.
Yeah, and it could be that you modify where there's just certain patients that you don't like working with or clients that you don't like working with, but you're so used to saying yes. And really, I've actually created a phrase, which is, really enjoy working with you, but I'm not the best person to help you get where you want to go. Let me refer you to this person over here.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that whole taking accountability, and, it's not you, it's me, but it actually is that case. And it's a way of phrasing it in a way where it's genuinely about client care. It's genuinely about wanting the absolute best for our clients, and
Yeah.
knowing that we can't be everything to everyone. Right.
No, and I think that that's a real challenge. Not only can we not be everything to everyone, we probably can't do all the things we want to do in one lifetime. And when people niche down or they start to get subspecialties, they really fear that it's like chopping off an arm and a leg. But what they don't realize is that if you pick some areas of subspecialty, you get better and better and better at it because that's where your focus is. And then people are more and more appreciative rather than being a dabbler. Like we've all seen on the Facebook forums of like, hey, I don't treat kids, but I have one now, what do I do in this situation? You refer them out. Like that's what you
Yeah.
should do.
One curiosity that's been sort of hanging here in the back of my mind is something you said earlier. Your grandpa, this entrepreneur, and an amazing story from the little I heard. And he was a little disappointed when he decided to go to acupuncture school, right? And um, I'm very curious about that. Again, we haven't dug into your history, like what you were doing and the version that existed prior to acupuncture school, but
Mm,
from the sounds of it, it was quite a strong departure. So
mm.
what was it that led you into this amazing world of holistic wellness and acupuncture weirdness?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So it really started early on. My first year, I went to Arizona State in Tempe, Arizona, and I started in business because they have a very good business school. And my economics teacher it was on President Reagan's cabinet, and it was the worst. I hated it. And I realized, I wasn't gonna knack getting a business degree, so I switched to psychology, and I got very fascinated in human development and human interaction. And, my, father, uh I had 2 dads, a stepdad who was a real estate agent, and, my, pop, as I call him, was a sociologist. And, he when I went to acupuncture school, I was headed to getting a PhD in industrial organizational psychology. And so that's business psychology. And he was pretty sad. He like lives his life in academia and really thought that I was making a mistake until I graduated and I was recruited to build one of the first integrative medicine programs in a Western hospital. And so I've met so many students that families just were not supportive. They're like, "You're crazy. What are you doing?" And it was the best decision I could make. Now, with that being said, there's like an elephant in the room in Chinese medicine that people need to realize, including any wellness situation, is all the curriculums are going up. They're skyrocketing. Right? And so it always hurts my heart a little bit when I find someone does what they do, but they have 200,000 in student loan debt, and that includes physicians and surgeons and like acupuncturists. And so what I would say is if break the model, like maybe there's a way to get a degree way more affordable. Most people don't talk about Pocatech, which you can become an acupuncturist if you would like at a fraction of the cost. Um, you won't get the Chinese medicine or the herbal side as much, but there are ways in which to get where you want to go without the burden. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I like that too. And I've found, particularly in the realm of TCM, like I taught in a couple different TCM colleges,
Hmm.
and I'm always curious, like why? Like this is a strange medicine, like it's mostly mystical unless you actually get into the scientific portion. But a lot of the schools are teaching like no, 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 it has nothing to do with the endocrine system. It is a yin issue, and it's like, oh, right. So, like, I'm
Yeah.
so curious about that. So I've talked to countless students,
Yeah.
and what I found is so many of them, they're interested in the philosophy of like this
Yeah.
just genuinely deeply tradition of holistic medicine. And it's like,
Yes.
okay, if you're into the philosophy, how do you feel about putting needles into people? How do you feel about talking about chi all day? Oh God, kill me. So
Yeah,
I
well,
think
I
I
would
think
say one more. If you're into the
yeah,
holistic philosophy, how's your money house doing,
right.
right? And so there is
Yeah.
a holistic way of being that each area of your life can actually be in flow.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and kind of playing on that idea of when we think of as a TCM practitioner is we're often taught, in fact, we're always taught about the body being this whole thing and one part is affecting the other part. And we kind of pride ourselves on this. I'm a holistic practitioner because I understand that if somebody has a problem in their X part of their body, it affects beautiful, great, love it. But for some reason, we kind of stop there. We stop the holistic understanding at the body, and we maybe dabble into the what do they call it, biopsychosocial model. But how many people seriously consider the fact that, hey, you know what, your finances are part of this holistic system that we call
Right.
your life, right? I
Yeah.
appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, I think it's important because I do feel like because of money trauma, that a lot of the best wellness providers that I would refer to left or right struggle financially.
Mhm.
And I think it's very important to have assets and to manage the debt load in a way that brings you freedom rather than feels suffocated.
Right. Right. I'm really curious about this actually. Maybe we could talk about that type of person. The demographics I mostly interact with in the wellness community are going to be massage therapists,
Mm,
acupuncturists,
mm,
and osteopaths. Now, where I live, the barrier to entry to massage therapy is the classic mirror test. Like, yes, you're alive. Welcome to the program.
mm,
It's not that much harder for acupuncture. You do need to have, potentially an undergrad, depending on what college, right? So, what I mean is, the barrier to entry with a lot of the demographics I work with is very low.
mhm.
And I've suspected over the years that part of the reason of that has actually to do with socioeconomic status. They don't have the money or believe they can't afford or have some sort of idea of some other form of education like an undergrad or whatever it might be. So all this is to say, my suspicion is a lot of people in this industry do have money issues. And
Yeah, that's probably true for the average American as well,
right,
right?
yeah, I suppose I'm narrowing it down a little bit too much, but certainly it's the case.
Yeah.
And this point has come up a couple times in our conversation. So is that something you work with people talking to them about? Is how do you overcome these money issues, whether they came from, poverty or even middle class or lower middle class? There's a lot of mental barriers that tell a person, hey, you know what, unconsciously and deeply embedded, this is the amount of money that you're going to make per year or something like that. Do you help people with that?
I think you have to help people with that. So,
Mm.
my personal story is that I had a business partner that embezzled money out of the business.
Mm.
And it was a tremendous amount. And it impacted me so much that I went through a bankruptcy. And that was the hardest period of my life because bankruptcy to me was I failed miserably. And failure, you can take it two ways. One is you failed and you're a loser and you shouldn't be involved in business at all. Or you failed, you can figure out why and what you did wrong, and you can really get some good hard knocks lessons. And what I realized when I failed, when this partner embezzled money is I was an ostrich. I never looked at the numbers. I put my head in the sand. I figured someone else had control of that part and that I'd be okay. And ultimately, you you can describe your money relationship by saying what kind of relationship you have with money. And if it's a hands off, I don't look at it relationship, that's think about a friend. If it was a hands off, we don't talk relationship, wouldn't be a very healthy relationship. And
Hmm.
so I had to do my money work. I had to hire a bookkeeper and I was really scared. I had to ask my bookkeeper to change the profit and loss statements and my personal budget into pie charts and bar graphs because my brain would get so overloaded looking at all the numbers. I needed it to be more simple. And that was the first step. And then the second step was I had heard Dave Ramsey say you should have 1,000 cash in your house at all times for emergencies. And people that don't get hit with things all the time. And I would get hit with like something from the car would go wrong or the washer would break. And I saved this money. And I kid you not, it was like immediately those things stopped happening. It
Hmm.
was just like some sort of energetic universal principle that I don't fully understand, but I can tell from experience that there was something there. So
Yeah.
I rolled up my sleeves and I started really learning about the energy of money. And I read books and I would do exercises. And ultimately, with my clients, if you don't start there, it's like building a new house on a piece of sand. Like you have to have a solid foundation because there are 2 reasons to be in business. One is you wanna have more freedom in life on your own terms, but the other is you have to be profitable for sustainability. Like, even the government says, if you operate at a loss, you can't do it every year, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there's so much territory for growth in that department because I think a lot of people don't want to or believe that it's too confusing or they're operating under the belief that whatever they were taught about money because it is kind of a taboo subject is the way to go. So where do people start? Like let's assume somebody hears this podcast and they're like, okay, you know what? Yeah, Jason's on to something here. Maybe I do have this belief. Like an example, I want to get into, but you reminded me of an example. I had this friend who used to always say, every single time I get a little ahead, every time something happens,
That's
and
right.
sure
That's
enough,
right.
every
Yeah.
single time he got ahead,
Yeah.
something would
Yeah.
happen. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that's weird because that's never really happened to me, right?
Right.
So, anyways, somebody's listening to this and they're like, okay, I get it, and I agree. Where do they start?
Well, the first thing coming back to your friend, it's really amazing because I do believe there's intergenerational trauma around money. Like, as I said, my grandfather came through Ellis Island. He had to flee everything and come with nothing with his parents, and start over. And so I think because of this taboo that you say and the trauma, it's just not talked about. And so you're not really supposed to ask what people make per year. Money is a subject that you're not really supposed to be public about. So then if you're private about it, but you've never had any mentors in it, then it's like, where do you go? And that's your question. And my answer is go find like Instagram reels now or YouTube videos are great for learning principles, right? Um, YNAB, I forget your something budget. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
you got to start having a budget. You can't
Yeah.
just not look at it. And that's my experience of hoping for the best that it all flushes out in the end. Like the more you have a relationship with it, the healthier that relationship gets. So, a couple of books. I'm a big fan of learning for free or getting paid to learn, and so Libby is like a service where you can get library books in the U.S. on audiobook,
Mm.
and so I'm a big audiobook fan. The Soul of Money is by Lynn Twist. Your Money or Your Life is a great one that's been around forever. Dave Ramsey is a guy. Uh, and then there's a relatively recent one. I think it's called uh, become rich, lucky bitch, or something like that. So I can't, I'm paraphrasing the title, but
Hmm.
that's a pretty good one. And it's kind of like if you're stuck on TikTok and doom scrolling, like add all those minutes up that you're wasting and go pick one book and do the exercises in the book. So that would
Hmm.
be the first step. And then eventually I would recommend getting a mentor or a coach, whether it's free or paid, where someone else is already successful and they're like, yeah, let's head this direction and let's
Yeah.
work this out. And often you need that hand holding because it's so painful to look at. It's like I just rather not. And that's
Hmm.
going to get you to the same place you are right now.
Yeah, yeah, I like that progression, and I grew up with similar to you. I had a dad and a stepdad and my mom, right, and all just amazing. A very fortunate story to say that that turned out very well in my situation. But I had a stepdad who was just like, or my sorry, my biological dad was terrible with money, absolutely terrible. Money came in, it was gone immediately. But then
Yeah.
my stepdad, he was like, you gotta know the law of accelerated zero, and both tradesmen, right, like carpenter and plumber. So,
Mhm.
but one was like obsessive with money, and then I got a mom who's just like, meh, money, whatever. So I had this
Yeah.
kind of mixed bag of learning about money, but I learned enough from, particularly from my stepdad, to have a
Yeah.
good idea, right, some insights. And that did a lot of good for me. But then there was this moment when I downloaded my first money management app for
Mm,
free.
mm,
I couldn't believe the difference that made. You know, similar to the
mm,
old principle of putting money in jars, right?
mhm,
But
mhm.
something super simple that's free that people could do is just download a money management app, and it will tell you, like, hey, looks like you're kind of spending a bit too much at Starbucks. Maybe you pump the brakes, you know? So
Mhm,
again, free. Then there's books. I really appreciate that progression.
mm,
And then moving
mm,
into the somebody gets that app and they're like, okay, this is harsh, this is something I don't want to do. Well, y- I think it's a pretty essential thing, not only in business but in life. So I appreciate that idea that you also offered of looking into hiring somebody that can help you. And it might sound counterintuitive, like to save money you're spending money on a coach, but it definitely will pay dividends, I'm sure.
and coaches are expensive. Maybe you start with a bookkeeper,
Right.
right?
Yeah, good call.
Maybe you get yourself on payroll, so as opposed to, like, just taking random draws, you can start to see very clearly what your draw is every month, right? So there's
Hmm.
simple steps, and then what most people don't talk about in the healing world is the way we love healing, like, we learn something new in the healing world and it works, and we just are fans of helping people heal. There are people that just love tax code and numbers. They are, like, wonky about it. They're like,
Yeah.
"Did you know the new tax code in the state's changing and, like, you could take this extra deduction over here?" Like, "No, I don't know that. I don't read any of that stuff." So having, like, a team around you that can really help you is
Hmm.
super valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an amazing moment in life, isn't it? As a business owner, when you realize like there's this thing that you've been just slogging away at and you just can't stand it and you're not good at it and it's a nightmare. And then there's that moment when you hire somebody to do something for the first time and you're like, "Hold on a second. I don't have to do this thing. Oh my God." And it frees up not only your time, which allows you to actually invest your time and energy in the things that will make you more money, but it also fills up that mental real estate and energy and all those other things. So it's a barrier for so many people to pay somebody else to do something that, damn it, I know I can do it. But oh, it is so often well worth it.
Oh, especially the things you really don't like to do. And what I would say about that is also, like, I'm sure, Jess, you have malpractice insurance. I have malpractice insurance. As opposed to find the lowest hanging fruit, you might want to find somebody that has insurance because they're not going to embezzle from you. Because I've actually had 3 clients in the last 5 years that their office manager was embezzling. And so
Wow.
when you hand off duties, you want to make sure you're protected.
I really appreciate that insight because that is a scary thing to consider, a very scary thing. And having gone through it yourself, I'd imagine it's left a pretty powerful exclamation point in
I
your.
I have some good hindsight lessons, that being one of them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And lessons we've learned. One of the things that I enjoy about workshops when I'm doing panel workshops is biggest mistakes, and that's something I would love to dig in. But we are getting close to an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. So if it's okay, I would like to kind of shift into a question that I ask virtually everybody. It's like my finishing question for the season of the podcast, and it's so as a practitioner and somebody who's been in this industry now for, what'd you say, 25-ish years, right?
Yeah,
1998, so
25 ish.
25-ish years, like a long time, quarter of a century. You've probably had a lot of different treatments, right? You've experienced being the patient, and of course, you have been the practitioner. You've hired them, so you probably have a lot of insight into this. In your experience, what do you think makes a practitioner successful?
When I was at the college, I did some research on this because I found that I wanted to know what were the ingredients of the most successful practitioner. And the number one thing that came to the top, which surprised me because I thought it was going to be clinical skills, was being a great listener. And so I have held that true and true that, you know, all your patients, all your clients want to get somewhere. And are you trying to really listen to see where the obstacles, the stagnation, the deficiencies, the excess are? Or are you just trying to fix it and get them there?
Hmm. I really appreciate that. And I want to promise the audience, whoever's listening, I didn't tell Jason to say that. I say that because, honestly, verbatim, word for word, this is the thing I say all the time because I have done the same thing. I have sent a survey out now to 4,000 practitioners asking
Yeah.
that question, and
Yeah.
my expectation was exactly the same as yours.
Ah,
I'm a continuing ed provider, right? I want to make
yeah.
courses that help people succeed.
Yeah.
So what I thought it was going to be is
Yeah.
technical skills and clinical
Right.
outcome. Because
Right.
quite frankly, that's the type of courses people look for, right? So it's
Right.
like, what makes you successful? You would think what people are spending their money on, but no, I got the exact same answer as you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listening skills, communication skills. So I'm
Yeah.
so
Soft
grateful
skills.
that you soft
Soft
skills.
skills.
That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm really, really grateful that you said that answer. Thank you very much for that. And
Ah,
before we're gonna wrap, sorry, anything else there?
no, no, just listening.
And before we tie a bow on this, is there anything else that you'd like to dig into? Any area that we kind of tiptoed into, but you'd like to dig into a little bit more?
Ooh, just the area of like we lose a lot of really good providers because they feel like they can't do it. The business side of it, like they have the healing side down. And I would say, you know, there's so many people out there that want you to succeed and to stick with it and find free help, find low cost help, and then move your way up to as you're making more, invest more into getting the support that you need.
Hmm. And I know that one area that is helpful. I've listened to a few episodes of the Wellness Renegade podcast, and this is the type of stuff you talk about, right? So I'd
Yeah.
strongly encourage anybody who's listening to check out Jason's podcast. Again, that's Wellness Renegades podcast, and I'm going to make sure to put a link in that description. But if people want to get a hold of you, maybe reach out and work with you directly, what's the
Mm.
best way for them to do that?
Oh, yeah. You can go to wellnessrenegades.com and you can find out about me and my services. And it's interesting because the one thing we didn't cover that I think is super important is technology's coming into the wellness community, whether we want it to or not. And so, really, SEO has been here for a while, but most people don't know that Google business profiles are free and that if you're spending a lot of time on your social media campaigns, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and you're not getting conversion, switch your structure over to Google Business Profiles. And if you need any help with that, you can reach out to me. Mention you heard me on this podcast, and I'll give you a additional special that's not on my website. But I just feel like people are spending way too much on activities on social media that aren't producing, so it's a waste of time. And Google Business is the way to go because it's free, and 96% of the internet uses Google, and Google Maps now is tied into SEO beyond what you could ever imagine. So when you can come up towards the top of a search, you're going to find that your numbers, I live in a town of 1,200. And with my Google business profile strategies, I got 45 calls last month.
That is impressive, and preach it. I think social media is over pushed as far as the way to
Agreed.
build a successful business across the board, regardless of your business. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate that final message. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Jess, I want to say thank you. I really appreciate being here. I want to thank the listeners that made it from the beginning and to the end of the pod, and really believes that the healthcare system in the US is starting to crumble. So your services are so needed. And whether you take insurance or you're cash pay only, you are needed in this community.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time, Jason. It was an awesome conversation. I'm very grateful we've had it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. I know time is precious, and I'm truly grateful you chose to share yours with us. So before we go, I want to share 3 key insights from our conversation that you can take with you. Number 1, create a business that aligns with your life's vision. As Jason shared, it's essential to build a practice that supports both your personal and your professional goals, so you can live life on your terms. Number 2, develop a healthy relationship with money. Financial well-being is truly part of holistic wellness. And as Jason emphasizes, understanding your finances brings stability and reduces stress in both business and in life. And explore alternative models for your practice. Whether it's a community donation model or a boutique experience, finding the right structure for you can prevent burnout and bring deeper fulfillment to your practice. And of course, a special thank you to Jason Stein for sharing his wisdom and experiences with us today. If the conversation resonated with you, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an opportunity to grow, learn, and build a more purpose-driven practice. Now you can find Jason at wellnessrenegades.com to continue learning from his amazing work. Until next time, be well, my friend.